Hey everyone, welcome back again for another video. Now I feel so naked because nothing's behind me and it's really bothering me. So I'm going to really try and start decorating the back, and maybe, you know what, I'll find other places in the house to film too, like just to mix it up. It's all a bit of a trial and error when you're in a new environment and you're trying to do what you love to do. Today I thought about talking about the forgotten generation of those who now should be diagnosed with ADHD. And those are, of course, women who used to be girls who did not get a diagnosis when they were girls. There are all kinds of issues that come from not being diagnosed with ADHD when you do in fact have it. Specifically in women, however, they would have likely missed a diagnosis when they were at their primary, elementary school, all the way up until high school and above. And it's not until they enter adulthood and have different kinds of responsibilities, such as running a family or working at a career, that is when they notice that they're struggling a lot more than what they think that they should. For me, this translated into frequent trips to the doctor and the psychiatrist where I would just get told, you have depression, you have generalized anxiety disorder, you have emotional dysregulation. And it's like, well, what does all that mean? Because every time I try and treat those things, the problems still remain. And I always found that I was constantly seeking for the answer. So today I'm going to be discussing the issues of this lost generation of people who should have been diagnosed with ADHD and the predominantly inattentive symptoms of ADHD. Undiagnosed ADHD or ADHD left untreated can look like, for men, substance abuse, adverse risk-taking, issues within the workplace, and physical manifestations of anger. Whereas with women, it can be a little bit different. We tend to be more prone to having eating disorders, to experience anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem, and our issues tend to be sourced from, or we get to know these issues based on the traditional societal expectation of being in the home. Women have been traditionally seen as the organizers, the planners, the ones who carry the mental load of organizing and running a household. Well, hats off to anyone who can run a household. For someone with ADHD, for a woman specifically who has ADHD, this is where they begin to realize something is actually going wrong. They feel that something is wrong with them. They end up placing these judgments on themselves because they have so much trouble organizing, planning, sticking to things, being on time, cleaning, organizing. And this also happens within our careers as well. Women are valued for all the things that they can do. We are strong, we are independent, we can handle things. Except if you have ADHD, it's a lot harder. And then you are faced with the fact that something is inherently wrong with you and you just don't know what it is. And this is where we cue the lost generation of those women who should have been diagnosed with ADHD a long, long time ago. We women place a lot of judgment on ourselves for not meeting those societal expectations of having it all together. This results in low self-esteem, it results in depression and anxiety and a general feeling of overwhelm, and that I can say I constantly feel on a day-to-day basis, even if it's something incredibly small, that feeling of overwhelm, of not being able to handle it, of not being able to have all my chickens or eggs in a basket, however the saying goes. Issues with women being undiagnosed with ADHD starts when they first enter a schooling system, whether that is in preschool or elementary school, when they start a discipline which is specific to what I like to call farmers, so neurotypical people. Our education systems are set up for neurotypical people. So for someone who has ADHD, it is really difficult to learn in an environment where it's set up for someone who is neurotypical. Unfortunately, many girls are not diagnosed in childhood because many of them tend to present predominantly inattentive. So there are 3 different kinds or subtypes of ADHD. First, there is the hyperactive, what you would generally consider ADHD, is what you see boys jumping off the walls, that kind of thing. And then we have Inattentive ADHD, which is more of the daydreamer, the one who's away with the fairies. And then you have the combined type, which is a little bit of both. Boys and girls can present in any of those subcategories. However, girls are more likely to present inattentive, which is what I was, which is what I am. So I'm going to go through the inattentive symptoms shortly. But I first want to cover what happens to girls who are not diagnosed, inattentive girls specifically who are not diagnosed. Inattentive girls who are not diagnosed are at higher risk of teen pregnancy. They're at higher risk of dropping out of school or college. They're at higher risk of career changes or getting fired from a job. They're at greater risk of letting bills go unpaid, of not running errands properly. And with all of these things, it can create unrest in that woman. She can feel like she's not meeting these expectations of her, specifically based on what society expects her to be. She can be overwhelmed constantly. She can have depression, anxiety, and she can also suffer from a little lovely thing I like to call rejection-sensitive dysphoria, which is not yet really recognized by the DSM. However, I'm really hoping that it's going to start getting talked about more, because this is the symptom of ADHD that affects me the most. I grew up being told I was a dumb blonde. I grew up being told I'm away with the fairies too much. I'm too much of a dreamer. I don't pay attention. I must be dumb. When you get told those things over and over and over and over again, it creates a negative thought pattern. You start to see yourself as those things because you're constantly being told them. People with ADHD receive 20,000 more criticisms by the time they reach the age 12 than neurotypicals. That's a lot. And when you receive that all the time, you begin to act that way. You begin to act dumb because you think, well, I am. So what's the point in trying, because I'm just going to keep failing? Rejection-sensitive dysphoria has stopped me making friends. It has stopped me going forward with confidence in certain careers that I wanted to pursue. It had made me want to drop out of university because I felt like I wasn't good enough. And it has contributed to my anxiety and depression that has plagued my life. When you're constantly turning down certain opportunities or feeling like you're not good enough to pursue those things, and you start seeing yourself in a very negative light, you start to kind of ask yourself, well, what is the point in even trying in life? What is the point in even existing when I'm just going to be miserable and I'm just going to be faced with rejection all of the time, no matter what I do? And obviously, logically, all of this stuff isn't true. And those with ADHD generally know that, but this pattern has been so ingrained into them that it's a really hard cycle to break. The other part of having ADHD that we don't often talk about is the emotional dysregulation. And this, of course, manifests in both males and females and in different ways. For me, I can get irritable so quickly, as I spoke about in the last video. My emotional threshold is so tiny and anything can set me off. I get really upset with even like the smallest bit of information if I don't agree with it or if it rubs me the wrong way. I really started noticing my ADHD when I became a parent, specifically a stay-at-home parent. I had my daughter quite young, when I was 19 years old. So I do fit that threshold of the typical inattentive ADHD woman having a child as a teen. That was me. And ever since then, I haven't really had the opportunity or really the confidence in order to pursue anything and really hone in on it. Except for now, I'm doing it a lot more. What I found with stay-at-home parenting is that it was so difficult for me to be able to run the household, to meet deadlines, to organize, to plan, to prioritize, to be at places on time. And the more I spent at home and not out socializing or making friends, it meant that I developed some kind of social anxiety, or that rejection-sensitive dysphoria just became even more apparent. I started losing the ability to be able to socialize well, and it didn't help as well that I'm an introvert. I began to feel really trapped by my circumstance. I felt like I was really invisible, that I was a nobody, that I would never amount to anything, after being told those things throughout my past as well. Pursuing things in my life that I'm passionate about or that I really value has also been difficult, because I had that underlying issue of the rejection sensitive dysphoria. It was like no matter how much I tried with something, or how much I loved it, or how much skill that I would build from it, I would still feel like I was never going to be good enough. This expectation, this pressure on myself, this sense of perfectionism in a world of chaos was incredibly and is incredibly disheartening. I am a bit of a daydreamer. My executive dysfunction means that my attention switches from one thing to another, and that can sometimes mean that my mind just goes completely blank and I'm not thinking about anything at all. This also means that things in the house may not get done. This means that the errands I was supposed to run won't get done. It means the phone call I was supposed to make won't get done. It means bills won't get paid. Having executive dysfunction issues means that the things I want to prioritize logically, I may swap instead for something that's really interesting and fun and engaging, and something that can really release my dopamine and get it firing. And this is where hyperfocus comes in, which is my favorite part of having ADHD. When you love something, nothing can stop you from going for that thing and excelling at it. Sometimes you can go for days on end hyper-focusing on this one thing, learning it until there's nothing more to learn anymore. However, unfortunately, when it comes to hyper-focus, it also means that we can stop hyper-focusing on that one thing that we love and switch it for something else, which means we're not really going to get anything done, and we're just going to have a whole bunch of unfinished projects. Another aspect of having an inattentive ADHD is my hyperactivity. I'm not hyperactive in the sense that I talk a lot and that I interrupt and that I can't wait my turn. And that's the difference between having the normal kind of hyperactive ADHD and inattentive. People with inattentive ADHD experience the hyperactivity inside. This means our brains are constantly going. They are not switching off. We can't sleep at night because our brains are constantly going. We're constantly ruminating. We're constantly picking up on subtle sounds within the room or outside. For example, hearing the fridge hum, hearing the crickets outside. And on top of that, we have to deal with whatever emotions we are feeling at the time, which is also part of the hyperactivity. The constant feeling and thinking, and nothing is switching off. This can be really distracting, and when you feel like you need to concentrate on something, you're constantly being distracted by whatever's hyperactive within yourself, and as well as the executive dysfunction issues. So it's a big old recipe for not getting anything done. So I hope going forward, people pay more attention to those who have inattentive ADHD and their early learning environments. I hope that we're able to change the way the education system is to meet those who are neurodiverse. And I know, of course, there are some programs out there. It's all about knowing how the ADHD brain works and knowing what suits that person, because within the right environment, the person who has ADHD can absolutely thrive. And that is where people with ADHD make really good entrepreneurs, for example. They just need to have the right setup. So can you relate to what I've talked about today? Can you relate to the symptoms I experience? If you do, leave a comment below. For now, however, I hope you guys have a really good day, night, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you guys all again for the next video. Bye.